So I'll give people a few minutes to come in. I want to introduce our guest, Louis from StarkWare. Obviously, scaling and Ethereum go hand in hand, and that conversation has been all over crypto Twitter. I'd love to chat about that a bit, what's been going on over this call. But I'm curious, would you just start off with your background, how you got involved at StarkWare, etc.?
Sure, happy to. So I got into crypto. Heard about crypto 2012, 2013. I remember trying to buy, my first Bitcoin with my credit card. My credit card wouldn't pass, and then got back into it in 2016. Bought my first ETH right before the DAO hack. So left it there and got into technically interested by beginning of 2017. And by end of 2017, I got interested in cryptography and Zcash and all those things. So I spent the entire year of 2018 while working as a data scientist, learning cryptography by myself. And by the end of 2018, I basically left my job, opened up a meetup to learn zero knowledge called ZK-Global, and which was in Tel Aviv, and then moved in London and expanded the meetup in London, Paris, and now in Toronto and Seoul. And at that time, so I was in London, and I went to a Zcash event with Dara Upwood, and I think maybe Sean Bow, explaining how Zcash worked. And at that time, I basically had a breakthrough, starting to get involved more with the Ethereum Foundation on the first specification of ZK-rollups. And by mid 2019, after a bunch of back and forth, StarkWare reached out and basically asked me to join as a product manager, which I've been doing since then. And
Awesome.
Now that StarkWare is StarkNet is going live, I moved a bit my position to be more in charge of the ecosystem, trying to bring more projects, more people to try out and adopt our tech.
Awesome. That sounds great. So I think this community specifically is probably very familiar with optimistic rollups like Arbitrum and Optimism. Perhaps you could just go over a high-level explanation of what StarkWare is building, how that differs, and then we could get into the pros and cons of both approaches in a bit.
Of course, happy to. So StarkWare is building what we call a ZK-rollup. So when it comes to ZK-rollup, the core idea that instead of using fraud proof, which can leave this week or whatever the time window of challenge, we get direct finality. We know we have a proof that says that what we did was correct. And so the main difference it brings is that you have, whenever you settle on L1, you have instant finality from the perspective of L1. And the other consequence, because of the way things work, a ZK rollup gets actually cheaper the more people use it, as opposed to an optimistic rollup, which is like the cost on chain is like linear with the number of transactions. If you want the cost of a ZK rollup, the more users use a ZK rollup, the cheaper it gets to use it.
Gotcha. And can you talk a bit about the pros and cons with both? I've seen some brief high-level explanation of how optimistic rollups have some advantages, some disadvantages. Maybe you can touch on that in as unbiased perspective as you can give.
I'm gonna sound extremely biased to you guys. I'm sorry, but I don't think optimistic rollup have any advantage except looking simple. Because, and I'm gonna say what I mean by that, by looking simple. More the other way around. I'm going to tell you what you can do with ZK rollup that you basically can do with optimistic rollup. The ZK rollup has these things where you, as I said, the more you use it, the cheaper it gets per transaction. You do things that you just can't do on any L1 or optimistic rollup, like cold data. Like when you transfer data from off chain to on chain, is roughly almost free or extremely cheap on the ZK rollup as opposed to a regular one. Why? Because all those data that what we call core data on Ethereum are data that you use once and never use again. Things like signature, things like Merkle path authentication, like Oracle price. All those things are things that you use once and never use again. On a classical blockchain, you just store it forever. On a ZK rollup, you can consume it once and just forget about it. And so the the main advantage that has been talked about is that this EVM compatibility, which is easier to onboard users or developers. But what we're being seeing right now is that ZK-rollup provides so much more powerful pattern that we have things that doesn't exist on other blockchain. There is a guy I like to quote always. He made a neural network, a machine learning model on Cairo. It does image recognition on the blockchain itself. And so what I'm trying to say here is not only when you use a ZK-rollup, you can do things that you can do on optimistic rollup, you can do things that you cannot do on any blockchain. And the last thing is about the EVM compatibility. We have an effort going on called Warp, which we expect to actually converge relatively soon, which will enable converting Solidity to Cairo directly. And that is going to be, I think, the best way to onboard devs. But once they're going to try out and realize that they get a lot more and a better programming pattern and more power using Cairo, I hope and I expect them to move to native Cairo rather than keep to Solidity.
So yeah, just to clarify for the audience, from a developer's perspective, if you're looking to build on StarkWare, there are some differences there, right? Like you can't just, with a optimistic rollup, it's kind of almost plug and play from my understanding, very easy to port applications over from a developer standpoint. But with StarkWare, that obviously that's not the case. You're working on something like that, but all of the core code does have to be changed, correct?
I mean, that is, like, first of all, the core code, if you're not using Warp, yes, you would have to rewrite it from scratch. And Warp is this transpiler. Now, I'm saying that if you have an existing code base and you need like to port to every blockchain, like you need to go to your project is like an aggregator, so you don't really care which blockchain, which L1, L2 sidechain you're in, and you just need to deploy everywhere. Yes, in that case, I fully understand that you need to keep your same code base. But if you want to create something new, then I would invite you to just use Cairo directly because you get more powerful, just more powerful programming. And I can just give you an example to this. So when DYDX joined us, they were already on L1, right? They were doing perpetual on L1. The cost of doing a perpetual contract on L1 was between $200,000 to $300,000, $200,000 to $300,000 gas per transaction. On DYDX now, we are sub 500 gas per trade. And the system is at least 10 times more complex and more sophisticated. They improve their leverage rate, like the leverage ratio. Now on L1 you could only, I guess, go to 5 or 4. Now you get to go to 25. There is a record price at every update, at every trade there is a record price, and they do cross margin, which you couldn't do on L1. So I'm trying to say that not only did they get cheaper transaction, they actually get a much better project directly on L2.
Gotcha. So when StarkWare reaches kind of a steady state where it's completely deployed, everyone's building on it, where they're fully going, like what TPS can users expect? Transactions per second?
That's a very good question. First, I mean, actually, I'm trying to fight against TPS because it's very hard to compare. Like, when people compare TPS, they usually cheat. They compare the simplest transaction around, which is an ETH transfer. So a TPS right now on Ethereum right now you have TPS for ETH transaction of something like 13 transactions per second. I guess maybe 15 now that we increase the gas price, the gas limit. What we have measured on StarkNet for a ZK rollup is something within the order of, I think right now we are like in production, we could do 200 TPS, and we showcase an example where we could do 3,000, I think it was 3,000 TPS for the ready demo. I don't remember, but it was, one-off rather than, sustained TPS. So for sustained TPS right now, would be easily doing 200 TPS. But the truth being told, there is technically no limit to the number of the TPS you get when you work with a ZK rollup. I can dive a bit into what it means, but roughly speaking, in the theoretical aspect, there is no limit.
Gotcha. I'd love if you could expand on that without getting too technical, just at a high
Sure.
level. I'd love to hear how you say there's basically unlimited TPS.
I can explain, sure. So what matters to ZK rollup is not the number of transactions that we're in. I'm not. I don't need. Let's say we do a transfer from one another. We do 1,000 transfer. You take a regular blockchain. Every time we're doing a transaction, we're sending a transaction. This transaction gets accepted and gets verified, right? But on the ZK rollup, what happened is what matters is the difference between the initial state and the end state. So the more transaction we do together, the cheaper it gets per transaction because we keep modifying only always the same storage, the same balances. And so the more there is, the cheaper it gets.
Gotcha.
Which is why, by the way, with DYDX, we get to sub 500
Yeah.
because it's a lot of same account trading more and back and forth.
Interesting. So would love to hear your thoughts on this whole layer one debate that's going on. Obviously, StarkWare has a bias towards Ethereum. You've received funding from the EF, passionate about decentralization. But like, let's just assume Solana hits all of these decentralization parameters that are important to us, even though that's not the case yet. But even assuming that, right, I think they can do 10,000 TPS maybe right now. They advertise up to 40,000. I don't think it's ever reached that limit in practice, from my understanding. But what are your thoughts on this? Can a layer one sufficiently scale, or do we need ZK rollups, optimistic rollups? Is the way to scale vertically versus on one layer one?
So that's a very good question. And my answer is we do need ZK rollup. And for the following reason. The way I imagine the future of blockchain in the following way is the way internet works. Internet is a network of network, right? And the way it works, we have this backbone of like 40 cables, worldwide running, connecting continents. Yeah. And then you have countries connecting to them, and then your city connecting to the country network, and your neighborhood and your street and your house.
Just a note on that. I found that so interesting, the transatlantic and transpacific internet cables. If you're watching this not live and recorded, I'll include a link to a video explainer on how that works, because that is a whole other topic that's really fascinating, but not related specifically to this. So
you're right. Thank you. And so the way you get true scaling is by having some network that does some networking. And the thing which is crazy about ZK rollup is that they can be layered on top of each other. So we always like to talk about ZK rollup, but what I actually care about most is something called volition and adamantium. And I'm going to explain what it means. So when you look at scaling, at optimistic ZK rollup, etc., we always talk about putting data on chain and putting, everyone having the data of everyone. But we don't really scale. I mean, that's not the thing I imagine the way to scale further. Like, because at some point, let's say everyone manage the data of everyone, then I'm not sure that we're going to scale properly with it. What I do imagine is having a sub-network where you have a subset of validators that you trust or you verify or belong to, that because you care about those, and those guys is like you belong to that group, and then this group belongs to a larger group and to a larger network, and so on and so forth until you get to the backbone. And so Starknet, for instance, which is StarkWare ZK rollup, can work this way in this levered, like recursive way of working on top of multiple Starknet, working on Starknet, working on Starknet, and managing the data at every layer differently. And so when you ask me about this, is the way I imagine the future where we have some network on top of some network connecting through this super powerful ZK tech.
Gotcha. So I would argue that this burden of scaling really has fallen on StarkWare in some way. Obviously, you have competitors. There's optimistic rollups, other ZK rollups. But I feel like in some ways you all are leading the charge. As a user and all of the users watching this, I think it's been maybe a tough few weeks seeing gas fees at such high levels. Obviously, I have a bias towards Ethereum. I think my community has a bias towards Ethereum. How do you think we should go about this? Should we be like our personal portfolios? Should they be restructured in any way because we're seeing these layer ones advertise more scalability right now? Should we hold the course? Do you think Ethereum will win in the long run over the next few years, this scaling debate? Will we truly be able to compete with these more centralized solutions?
I do not doubt a second about it. And I'm going to, I was actually having a debate on Twitter with Anatoly, and Polinia putting into it, and a bunch of other. Exactly what scaling. So I was trying to define scaling, because scaling is like, people confuse throughput and scaling. Throughput is not scaling. Throughput is, when we compare the TPS of Bitcoin and the TPS of Ethereum and the TPS of Solana, it doesn't fucking make sense. We're not comparing things apple to apple. A target machine for Bitcoin is a Raspberry Pi with like a strong hardware, like a disk. Roughly for Ethereum, it's like maybe a $40 machine on Ocean, DigitalOcean or something like this. And for Solana, it's maybe like Anthony said $500 a month. I believe it's more like $2,000 a month to run a Solana machine, without even counting the communication, which are expensive, very expensive on Solana. So we're not comparing the same thing. And Duncan was saying, like, if we just take the EVM and put it on Solana machine, we could get to 2,000 TPS. Duncan being one of the EF researcher working a lot on those topics. This is throughput. More TPS is throughput. Now, scalability is more TPS for the same hardware. And what ZKPs bring to the table is the ability to separate the notion of verifier from the notion of miner, sequencer. And so we cannot get scaling without having stronger sequencers. Those guys, they need to have extremely strong machine, and it's fine because they're paid for it. But the 14 years old prodigy in the middle of Cambodia who's going to want to try the system because he's a curious and wants to hack stuff, he won't be able to pay the $2,000 machine on Solana. But if he can run Ethereum on his laptop, then he's going to try things, he's going to invent things, and he's going to make what the innovation is going to be about. And so when you ask me why I expect Ethereum to win in the long run, it's because they have the best community. People who are actually trying out, looking into the detail, breaking things, and TPS is just a band-aid on the hurt leg, if you want.
Gotcha. So switching gears a bit to like what is available right now, what is imminently coming. I'm curious, how far ahead are optimistic rollups right now? Arbitrum and Optimism are live in the sense that there's many applications you can use on them. They're not fully complete, but they're more ready than ZK-rollups.
Go tell that to DYDX.
Right. That's a more limited use case. It's one application.
The thing is, DYDX and the StarkX ecosystem. So StarkWare has these two products, the StarkX and StarkNet ecosystem, right? StarkNet is this ZK-rollup L2, which is coming out next week. And StarkX is this single dApp rollup, single application-specific rollup. StarkX has been doing more transactions than all the combined different L2 solution together. So when you ask me, are they ahead? The question is, it's the same tech. Like what we're seeing right now for StarkNet is exactly what we use internally to build DYDX, to build Immutable, to build Sorare. So I do get the point that it does give the impression, because it's permissionless, that it's more ready. I feel that we just dog feed ourselves with our tech before providing it to the public, and I think now it's just ready for devs to try out.
So I guess I would ask, perhaps that is all true, but like when will we have a Uniswap fork or Uniswap itself running on a ZK rollup? When will we see like a flourishing ecosystem? When will we be at a place where users go from Coinbase or Binance straight to a ZK rollup and they can bypass mainnet? No one deals with mainnet.
Very good question. So Arbitrum had understood, Crypto.com joined them, withdraw to ZK. I think maybe OKX.
I think Binance was the big one last week.
No, so yeah, Binance always goes after other people. So Binance just did allow deposits as a story. They allow deposits right now, they don't allow withdraw. ZK Sync announced a bunch of others, Crypto.com, I don't remember, like a bunch of others. And obviously we're in talk with them, with all of them, trying to get them, to on board. When will a user be able to withdraw directly to an L2? It's an excellent question, and expect it to be sooner than later. I don't have an answer to you because it's not in our hand. It's those centralized entities who are the gateways to Flatter ramping, And I actually do personally hope that we see more decentralized chat on-ramping solution like MoonPay or Ramp Network that are would enable users directly on board on Layer 2 rather than going fiat to crypto on Kraken or Binance.
Gotcha. So would it be premature to say like 2021 was the year of alternative layer ones and 2022 is the year of scaling Ethereum, or is it still too
I
early to say
not
that?
think I don't think it's too premature. I think that's what we're going to see. Like you'll be surprised by the application the application we're seeing on coming up. Like right now, we are seeing a lot of game coming to Starknet because they are priced out of basically any L1, L2 at the moment. We're seeing DeFi application coming too, like Zigzag. I invite you to have a look. Zigzag, there is one dev in 1 month from the time we talked the first time to the time he went to production. That was 1 month. Him learning a new language, deploying, testing, and supporting everything. So no, you're right. If you ask me, is 2022 the year of the scaling of ETH? The answer is for me is yes, a hard yes.
Gotcha. I have a lot more I want to cover, but I should remind the audience, if you have questions you want to submit, I can see the chat here. So just submit your questions and we'll try to get to what we view as the most important ones or the best ones we can take on. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit. First, congratulate you on your Series C that you guys have just raised. That's amazing. I obviously love seeing funding coming into this space, and I think it makes me feel more comfortable that even if we have a 2-year bear market, a 3-year bear market, whatever it is, like these teams that are building this critical infrastructure have the time to build it. The market conditions are kind of less important. But whenever I see like these big raises, I immediately jump to the thoughts of a token, and I know that's what the audience is very interested in. First question, like, do you think optimistic rollups, ZK-rollups, these scaling solutions should have tokens for the platforms?
That's a heavy one. Should they? It's an excellent question. The problem you have it's an excellent question, and I don't really have a good answer to it because it's project by project. I come from a time where tokens were looked upon, like frowned upon. Like 2019, I remember all those tokens being like, oh, they're all shitcoin and blah blah blah, and 2018 same, and now everything's as a token. Everything is a token. The governance valueless token. I to be honest, it's a good question. Tokens are very useful for coordination. But at the same time, I also do see the value of having other way of monetization, and so I don't really have a hard answer to give you here because I don't even know what I think about this. It's still an open question. I believe that only ZK Sync announced a token at this point. Mm-hmm. I guess everyone expects token for everything in this day, so. I really don't have I don't have an answer. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm curious. What do you think? I think we're like the past couple of weeks, and with everything happening with these other layer ones, we're seeing some pushback from the Ethereum community, basically saying Arbitrum optimism, come out with your tokens now, incentivize early adoption. Let's bootstrap these optimistic rollups in the layer 2 communities. I'm curious what you think there. I think I'm more and more aligning with the mentality that, like, yes, a token would make these networks more competitive with like what Avalanche has been able to do, what Solana has been able to do, etc.
For me, so you're basically asking about like liquidity mining. Is liquidity mining a useful tool?
Well, not necessarily. I think that's like a totally separate debate because there's so much liquidity mining is like inefficient incentive mechanisms. The designs are poor.
Right.
Like, I don't necessarily agree with yield farming liquidity mining campaigns from a protocol perspective if it's worth it for the protocol. But from a layer 1, like we have seen that method work. I think it's different for an application, but on a layer 1 or a scaling solution, that's a bit different of a debate.
That's a very, it's a good question. And what I do want to, what I can tell you right now, and I think this is also what we are targeting in terms of ecosystem and people building on top is the people who were, what I do see right now is a lot of fork, a lot of, very few innovation when it comes to
Yes.
project being built. When I'm looking at what's going on in Starknet right now, I see only innovation, only new things. And I'm not doing that. I sound like a cheater here, but I'm actually dead serious. Look at Gifty Gyoza NFT, not NFT, and Gifty Gyoza Twitter. You see that this guy is building a physics engine because he wants to make like a scorched earth, like basically like a thing where you can predict like the trajectory, like the missile, and basically play a missile game on chain. Is working on AI on chain. Why? Because he wants to enable, verifiable machine learning. So maybe it sounds ridiculous right now, and it's called. A lot of people would say it's creative coding. Like I'm writing something. I don't know what's going to output, but at some point it might become crazy. And you can think about creative coding like Uniswap when it started was not a business. It was a guy taking an idea was written by Vitalik like 3 months before on Reddit and spend a weekend writing it, basically writing his first code ever. And so this was new. And what I'm seeing right now on Starknet is things that are new, like Dope War is looking into ways to play the game directly on layer 2. We have Brick. Those guys are making a sort of Minecraft on layer 2, where you can actually play the game as create your own structure. Who else? Like Zigzag. Zigzag is saying it's basically creating another book exchange directly on L2, like very similar to Serum, but without the on-chain order book. So what I'm seeing right now happening on Starknet is true innovation, and that is what I think will bring, or what I'm looking is for organic growth. And I do think those people, those projects, those crazy guys, the crazy project coming up are what's going to bring that organic growth. So are the tokens useful to bring people? Sure, 100%. But I think innovation is what will bring the space forward further. So I don't have a clear answer to why do we need a token or not. Boobash seems to show that the token helps, but is it true organic growth? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I totally hear you. The last question I want to touch on regarding tokens is: do you think I think one huge benefit is that it allows the actual ecosystem to better support projects and convince projects to build on that layer 2 or scaling solution. And we saw that with Polygon. They have funds to get folks to build on the Polygon POS chain. We're seeing Avalanche deploy these incentives, and it is a huge cost to bear for the layer, for the blockchain itself. But I think in some ways it could be worth it supporting developers. What are your thoughts there? Do you think you can get the developer ecosystem you need to come over to Cairo and to building with StarkWare without these incentives?
Yes, seriously, I'm not even kidding here. Yes, look, I'm going to give you an example. Another example: Snapshot. Snapshot is the most used DAO tool in the market by far, right?
Yeah.
If you talk to Fabien, the founder, Fabien will tell you the future is Starknet. Why? And I'm quoting him here, because what we're building with him right now is StarkVote. So StarkVote is an L1 off-chain voting solution. Meaning, I wrote a thread about it explaining how every voting token right now has this 20,000 gas overhead. I mean, you may have read it in the past because of something called ERC20 snapshot. And with StarkVote, we basically remove that need while improving and reducing the cost of voting by a factor 40 or 100 almost. And so he's building right now a Cairo team internally, and he's most of his development right now will be about Cairo. Mm-hmm. We are working with Maker. Maker is doing a StarkNet bridge, and the StarkNet, they're going to move Maker to StarkNet directly. We have been in talk with a bunch of other existing L2. One of them, one of the major lending platform. One of the founder wrote a tweet, talking about Cairo. I'm not sure it's public, so I won't say the name, but You can look it on Twitter, saying that there is a strong interest there. What I'm trying to say here is the you don't, yeah, I'm not sure you need that liquidity incentive to bring people, a user, when you bring the builders. Builders will create, user will join. That's my
Gotcha.
take.
So switching gears a bit, I interviewed the founder of Terra, Do Kwon, and asked, like, why do you have to build your own blockchain, secure your own blockchain? Like, could you theoretically build as a Validium revolution on top of Ethereum? He pushed back against that. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Do we think some of these centralized, perhaps less secure blockchains that are able to coordinate and build an ecosystem right now, do you think they'd be better served to build on top of Ethereum and depend on Ethereum security, or do you think they're going to keep diverging on paths and there's really just going to be a split there?
I can't talk on their name, but I would just assume, just business wise, that for them perspective, having an L1 and having a token from an L1 is more profitable. So there is
Yeah,
this conflict of what is the best for the project, or what makes the most financial sense, and what is the better way to coordinate the community. And we all know that the crypto community is very money incentive, right? It's very money driven, for good or bad reason, by the way. It's not me to judge. So do I think they would be better off building on Ethereum or through an L2? Yes. Do I think they're going to do it? Probably not. And but then in the future will change, and we saw L1 project moving to L2 like Synthetics. I don't see why they can correct course later on in the future.
gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the idea that, like, 10 years from now, we're going to live in a vibrant multi-chain world where there's Ethereum, well, maybe not Ethereum, but several chains that people use for different reasons, and perhaps they all talk to each other. Do you think we're going to live in a multi-chain world like that? Or do you think that one chain, whether it's Ethereum or something else, will solve scalability in a decentralized fashion through ZK-rollups or something else, and that all of this activity can live on one main chain?
I don't. The multi-chain word is something that doesn't make sense to me economically, but I could be
Mhm.
wrong. I've been wrong in the past. So economically speaking, liquidity attract liquidity, right? Like
Yeah,
liquidity, and so I do see strong incentive for project to be close to another for obvious reasons. So now, will we see a multi-chain word? Um, I my gut feeling is probably to say no, but I'm probably too techy to for the truth. I think the answer is probably yes, but I don't like the answer.
yeah, gotcha. Um, I think we touched on this a bit. Obviously, you're very aligned with the Ethereum community, received funding from the EF, but why is Starkware building on Ethereum? Anything you can touch on there?
Sure. I mean, that's a very good question. The answer is very simple. Is we believe that Ethereum has the best community. We
Hmm.
really believe that Ethereum has the best network effect. But for instance, if tomorrow, I mean, let's be very clear, if tomorrow the Bitcoin community asks us to expand Starks on top of Bitcoin, we would love that. I mean, I also love Bitcoin. I got into crypto through Bitcoin. So what I do care about is, and I think I'm talking on my behalf here, is um, either if Ethereum, either if it's Bitcoin, I care about having a trustworthy, neutral, governance neutral environment that is not lying about what it is, that is very clear about its goal, very clear about its definition, very clear about its design, its future, rather than anything else. So will Starks are limited to Ethereum? The answer is no. But will we focus all our energy on Ethereum for the next year and more? The answer is yes.
Gotcha. Awesome. There were a few questions from the audience I want to get to, but the last thing I had prepared that I want to cover is, what do you think Starkware's greatest challenges, or perhaps maybe it's better to generalize with ZK rollups? What are the greatest challenges with moving forward? Um, yeah.
So the greatest challenges, it's the So it's how we worked very hard for the last 3.5 years. StarkWare is a 3.5 year company, bringing that tech from literally paper. You can look it up, 2018. Eli Ben Sasson, Michael Khabiev, and Alessandro Chiesa, and I forgot the fourth, writing the Stark paper, coming from academia to a production-ready solution. And we work on it. It's our baby. We are pushing it, and we are only so many in the company to do this. So why the biggest challenge is, can we manage to bring a community of extremely talented and young engineers, communicators, educators, to pick up and take what we built on and build on top, expand it, pick up where we suck, and improve what we did wrong. And so there is this whole understanding of that we need to move, we need to explain to the rest of the world how they can use this, and now they can make this their own and expand, improve what we did.
Gotcha. So I've been trying to engage the community more and doing a better job of taking questions from the community, so have reserved quite a bit of time for that. First question here touches on something we tried to cover at the very start of this conversation. Basically, why do ZK rollups get more efficient with higher transaction throughput? Maybe you could explain that
Sure.
again, or just clarify the position there.
So you have to understand a few things about ZK rollup. So ZK rollup are validity proof based. So once you use a transaction, you can delete it forever. You don't need it. If you're very familiar with blockchain, it's like a prune blockchain. It's like a ZK rollup is like a prune blockchain by default. And so what it means is, for instance, if you do, let's say you have a block, I'm going to call a batch a block, and you have a Uniswap pool, and that Uniswap pool is used 100 times, 1,000 times, then from the perspective of the ZK, what matters is what is the state, the balance of the pool at before the batch and at the end of the batch. So if you're 100, 1,000 people to use in the same batch, it's exactly the only thing that matters is the net difference. And so the more people use it, the cheaper it gets for each user. And another thing about ZK rollup is that they are able to have this notion called recursion. So recursion means that I can prove a proof. So I can, let's say I have this, let me give you a scenario, which is I have this bunch of transactions, I'm proving them. And now, I don't want to have this machine to be too strong. I need this machine to be like a regular server you can find for let's say $1,000 on AWS, let's say something like this, right? And then now I have another set of transactions that come at the same time, and I'm processing them sequentially, but I want to prove them, but the proving takes time. So what I can do is I can just prove the first batch in one, then the second batch in another computer, and so on and so forth. And then I can, take all those proofs and once again batch them together. So now we have your horizontal scaling. And from the perspective of the verifier, from the perspective of the user, of you and I, on their machine in their home, they can just verify a single proof that is going to be going from A to B with skipping every step in the way. And so the more you use it, the more efficient it gets.
Gotcha. So it's almost like you would say the TLDR, like a socialization of the computation costs. I'm curious, I was under the impression optimistic rollup scaled in a similar fashion. Are you saying that's not the case, where there's no...
Optimistic rollup scale linearly with the cost of optimistic rollup is linear with the number of transactions, when the cost of a ZK rollup is linear with the number of users in the same batch. So if the same users pool, set of users are doing more stuff in the batch, more than one operation, they already scale better than the optimistic rollup would.
Gotcha. I see a question here, and thank you for clarifying that, from YNBox. Is there any coordination between StarkX and ZK Sync?
Not directly. We know each other for a very long time. We are not working on using the same tech. They are using Plonk, as far as I'm aware, the last news. We are using Starks, and so there is very little to collaborate on. That what I can say though is people like Maiden from for Bobin. So Bobin is this former Facebook guy who was hired by Polygon. Is someone we worked a lot in the past, and he just joined Polygon. And so Eddie was putting recently that next time someone tell us that the Starks are proprietary, just show them Polygon and the Maiden team, because extremely strong team. Looking forward to see what they come up with.
Gotcha. And then I think I saw a question somewhere buried there from Winebox. Is all of this code open source? Are there any differences there with
Sure.
legality with StarkWare, ZK?
Sure. I can dive a bit. So StarkWare is so StarkWare code is the following way. So the verifier, the StarkWare paper is open source. Anyone can implement as shown by Polygon. The Cairo paper, which we published 4 months ago, explaining how we were able to create a VM on top of Starks, is open source. The verifier implementing this Cairo VM is available as smart contract, and you can look it up on our GitHub and verify it, check it out, whatever you want to do with it. The StarkEx, the StarkNet code is open source. And the only thing that at the moment, and I'm specifying at the moment, is not open source is our provers. But two things about this. The first one is provers, from the cryptographic perspective of it, do not have to be open source, because the verifier is the one you need to trust. The prover could be full of shit, but he will not be able to lie to the verifier. Think about it a bit like, the way I like to think about it is, if you're familiar with if you're mining, there is what is the name of this very strong GPU miner that everyone used. It was using back in the day. It was I forgot. Anyway, and this GPU miner was like closed source and whatever. What I'm saying is that you don't need to trust the GPU miner to use it. Same way in our provers, we don't have to use it. Now the second thing is, so you can work with me. What I'm saying is that you can work with us, use our provers, trust the verifier. Now, what I'm going for here is Starks, the prover, when we will open decentralization, which will happen by mid-2022, we will open source provers. And the reason why we don't it earlier is we feel we haven't created the moat, a strong enough moat to avoid just open sourcing stuff and people to go and and basically take it from us. A bit like I'm not going to give names, but what happened to Optimism recently. So we rather wait and open source a bit later when will be able to have this moat, rather than be rushing to please a few crypto heads and basically limit the innovation because people just run away with it.
Gotcha. So Leo asked a question here, which I think is really the question behind the question when everyone talks about airdrops and tokens. Like, most people don't have access to investing in a Series A or getting exposure, or Series C, excuse me, and getting exposure there, right?
I wish.
Yes, of course. So let's assume I'm bullish on ZK-rollups or these scaling solutions in general, maybe StarkWare specifically. Like, what are the ways to get exposure? Is there a way to invest and protect ourselves or get exposure to the future of scaling here?
I can only talk for myself here, and as a long-time crypto guy, blame the American security laws. We would love to have more retail investors, I guess, but the thing is, both the overhead and the complexity of making it happen kind of is a no-go de facto for enterprise. From what I understand, I'm not the thought leader, and I'm not the decider on this topic, and can just assume what's going on when we talk to Sequoia. Now, if you want to get exposure, it's a very good question. I would say that right now the best way to get exposure to StarkWare would be our partners. DYDX has a token, Immutable has a token, Diversify has a token. And that is sort of best way to get exposure. But once again, this is not a financial advice. I'm just saying publicly where you can get StarkWare exposure. Now, like the other way, and I guess the best way to say it is, if you want to get exposure on StarkWare and StarkNet, just build on Cairo. But then not everyone is a builder. But if you are a builder, the best way to bet on StarkWare success is to build on StarkWare. That's not StarkNet. That's basically my sort of final words to say. If you look at my Twitter, I guess the background is building on StarkNet is a financial advice. Feel free to take that as an advice and start work on StarkWare.
Yeah, that's interesting. I appreciate the tips there. Keith says interesting comment here, very short and sweet, just by ETH.
I agree.
We're not trying to pump the price of any token, right? But I'm curious, do you think if ZK rollups win on Ethereum, right? Like, do you think that value accrues to ETH because of EIP 1559, because of the network activity?
Yes, and for the reason I'm going back to the original reason, which was the way I'm seeing the future going on, which is if in the vision I described, where we have this backbone, ETH will be the backbone, and we will be all priced out of ETH. I'm 100% sure we are all gonna be priced out of ETH. Even the guy who owned a CryptoPunk will be priced out of ETH at some point. And exactly, ETH is transitioning to a settlement layer. I was discussing today about data availability. Like ETH will become a mix of settlement layer and the data layer. That's how I imagine it. And this is it's soon gonna be the most expensive line of communication you're gonna get in the world. So yeah, I have zero doubt that the success of optimistic rollup, the success of ZK-rollup will convert in the success of long-term success of ETH.
Gotcha.
Of course, once again, I'm a very bad trader, so don't trust me.
Yeah.
Just very clear.
I would be curious to get your thoughts on like the market right now, but aside from that, I am curious. Like we bring the interesting like thought, like maybe ETH accrues the value that these rollups and scaling solutions bring. I've never actually seen estimates, but how much does ZK rollups actually pay relative, for how much they're benefiting on Ethereum security? So like, is it something that optimistic rollups, like, do they pay thousands of dollars a day to run on Ethereum right now, millions of dollars a week? What are the numbers there?
So I don't have the exact number top of mind, but last time I checked, I think, of course, those are public numbers. So last time I checked, I think DYDX was paying 15 ETH per week for all the DYDX. I think Sorare was paying something around like 7 ETH, maybe more, but like it would be within this realm. So funny enough is DYDX Sorare before working with us, they were paying their users ETH, and so they were paying at some point in May, right in May 2021, something like $1.8 million of fees per week. Wow. And they divided by, I guess, 100 working with us. The reason is they were using 5% of the network. No one knew about it, which was super funny, but there is a tweet explaining it. Are they paying enough to secure the net, to benefit from the security of the network? Probably not. But I'm going to say the following thing is because the others are not competing with us yet. What I do think is that the settlement layer will become more and more valuable. We will have private network on top of Ethereum. We will have private Starknets, something that no one's here about yet, which is an environment which is controlled by a centralized entity, but trustless. Think about a CBDC, like a central bank digital coin, could be like a ZK environment running on top of Ethereum, but an environment where the central bank could control everything happening there. We may or may not agree with it, but they will need control. That's how they define themselves. And so we are not talking only about one Starknet, and we're talking about a bunch of a ton of Starknet, a ton of ZK rollups running on the same L1. And so I do expect the L1 to remain crowded. Yes.
Gotcha. Just so I can get a better sense of like how the scale works here for projects and rollups paying back to the ETH network. You mentioned DYDX maybe does 15 ETH a week. It pays to the Ethereum layer 1 network. Let's just assume DYDX's transaction volume doubled next week. Would it pay 30 ETH a week, or is the amount
No,
different?
it would pay 16. That's the thing. That's the beauty
So
of
this goes back to the
ZK Rollup.
economies of scale.
It's logarithmic. The cost is
Yeah.
logarithmic. And actually, with recursive proof, the cost is can be almost constant or somewhat constant, because it basically goes down every time to how often do you want to settle on L1. Sort of the underlying question you're asking here is, how often do I need to go back to L1 to secure what happened in the batch? And
Gotcha.
so depending on what the frequency is, this is how much you're going to pay.
Do you know what DYDX's frequency, out of curiosity, is?
Right now, they're settling every hour.
Every hour. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, there is a bit of latency. So they are sending a proof every hour, but they are there is a bit of latency in the proof. So what's happening like in the next hour will be something happening like 6 hours before. Something. You can look it up.
We talked about the market. I think a lot of folks have questions about like investing in, scaling on Ethereum, et cetera. Just to talk about the market as a whole, do you believe that these scaling solutions will kind of trigger what people call a super cycle, or do you believe like we're very much in a still cyclical crypto market? I know that's not your area of expertise.
I mean, I'm gonna. Can I play Joker here? Like, can I eat the buzz, because I have genuinely no clue. I am a very poor investor in very poor traders. If you want me to tell you all the stories of how I was dumb and I sold the bottom, I sold the bottom on the 15th of September 2017. I sold the bottom of China FUD in 2017. I sold the bottom of Bitcoin in 2018. I sold the bottom of no, the only good trade I sold right before COVID, but I didn't buy until I reached back the price on which I bought. So extremely poor trader. So don't trust me when it comes to trading. This is my answer to your question.
So you tell us when you're selling, and then we'll all go ahead and buy.
That's what I used to tell my friend. That's just I used to tell my friend. So now I'm just not selling anymore. What's the point? Up on me, right?
Yeah. Gotcha. So I'll let, if there's any last minute questions, please submit them now. What I wanted to end with is, I'm just curious, aside from what you're working on StarkWare, what else in the Ethereum ecosystem are you most excited about?
That's a very good question. I'm very fascinated what's going on with DAOs.
Mm-hmm.
I work closely with Snapshot. I told you, because of StarkWare.
Yeah.
And you have to. I have to admit that everything happening at the DAO level, seeing those group of people self-organizing, Discord, what's going on Discord, like right now, on our Discord, on StarkNet Discord, we have like a guy. I'm going to give you. There is this guy. Just show up like a month and a half ago. I said we didn't have a lot of tooling back then. I said someone asked about the StarkNet GS, which is like equivalent to Web3 GS. Like it's a connecting, how you connect from a UI to StarkNet. We say we don't have it. If you do it, do it. The guy didn't pick up, but Sean, or 0x Sean, took it. The next day he published it. We reached out. He started working with Argent. We discussed with him. He said, we asked him, what do you want to build? And now it's like, I want to build this project, this IMM. And now he's already running for, launching full time. I don't know what the state is. I don't know if it's going to go full time, but he's looking into it. So I forgot the question was, and then I went, so the DAO. So, people like the dynamics of self-organizing community where you have just so much opportunity popping up out of thin air. So DAOs. The second thing that I'm very fascinated about is something called decentralized gaming. Not Axie, not Sorare in that sense. Decentralized gaming is games that actually are traded on L1 or on the blockchain or settled on the blockchain. There is this fascinating Discord called Decentralized Gaming Association. Yes, I'm the counter trade. Never trust me. Decentralized Gaming Association. And what I was about to say. And so where those guys are thinking, how can I have like a game of chess that's settled on an L2? How can I have this mental poker? How how can I play this MMORPG on the blockchain itself? And because that matters, because if you can make it happen, it means that you no longer have games that can go offline when there is still users. For any gamers, it's very classical for the company to just say at some point, I don't know why I'm not going to run the servers anymore, so I'm turning off. And if you were to be able to run it on the blockchain, it doesn't have to be running on the blockchain, it's to be run through the blockchain at some point, then you would have games that will never stand, never stops. And that is absolutely fascinating.
Gotcha. I see some thank yous in there, and I can't thank you enough. I'm sure the whole ecosystem and everyone in our community is thankful of what Starkware is doing. I think you have a huge burden on your shoulders right now, but it's my hope that the technology wins out against the narratives we're seeing, and hopefully
Oh,
the
don't worry,
community
the
can come
narrative.
back
I'm
together.
working on the narrative right now. I mean, thanks, Polinia. Polinia is doing an amazing job.
Yes, they
Uh,
are. I'll post their medium below if anyone wants to read about their thoughts on how blockchains can scale and why Ethereum's going about it the only way possible. So,
yeah,
yeah. So with that, thank you so much, Louis. We really appreciate it. Really appreciate all the information and backstory you gave on Starkware, and then just your thoughts about where the market is now, where we're headed with scaling. Would love to do this again. Hopefully, Starkware and what you're building it will imminently be released, so everyone can
next week
interact
we
with
are
it more.
going live next week, and download the Argent wallets. They are called Argent X. It's not they're submitted to the Chrome app. So if you want to use Starknet next week, you wouldn't have to download the Argent X wallet, which is not yet available on the Chrome's App Store, but should happen soon.
Gotcha. And again, playing around with these technologies is the best way to expose yourself to new ecosystems, potential airdrops in the future, not necessarily with Starkware, but with other apps and whatnot. So play around with everything, try everything out, and then make your determinations on what technology will win.
Yeah,
So
just
thank
by the
you.
way, there was a question about Zigzag. Zigzag is amazing. I'm just saying, there is like, what about Zigzag? There is just Zigzag.exchange. They are right now running on ZK Sync. They're going to be live on Starknet at launch or right after launch. Seriously, the guy 1 month between start to end, and like between beginning to basically having production ready code. So absolutely fantastic.
Amazing. Sounds like a lot of exciting stuff is coming out. Can't wait to see what the next month brings. And thank you all. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And we will talk to you all soon. Thanks, Louis.
My pleasure.